see. Will let us know how we can support our organizing efforts in Portland and some website and tenants' rights. But if you get something shy about finding us, speaking of not being shy, we'll be pausing the program to ask, give our speakers a chance to answer your questions. Before I introduce some special guests, I'll turn it over to Seth from Our Revolution Maine, who's going to talk about Our Revolution Membership Club.
Hi, Jane. Thank you so much. It's really great to be in virtual. School and I'm glad we put this really simple meeting together. So outstanding. Everyone has membership Maine for Our Revolution is for schools to become a sustainable energy for people with program meeting that was managed for just 5 minutes. That's what I'm telling you. Welcome everyone to serving the Democrats have no excuses. They've got bad laws in Congress and railroads to need. We insist on $15 at the minimum for non-federal workers and potential workers as well. Pushing for a 15 by minimum wage across the nation. It's just not bad, but this is what we're going to see. So, that's a very little reason. Sometimes for-profit energy utility in Maine. So two great progressive protecting victims of COVID. Thanks for joining us, Seth. So, if you could just tell us a little bit about CNP, the plans of CNP, why you want to turn it into a consumer-owned utility, and okay, so thanks for having us. Thanks to everyone at Our Revolution for all your efforts. The reason I've been involved in the Minnesota Club, and what the hell was I've been involved in the Minnesota Club for the past 15 years. addressed and affordable and made transition. No, taking credit for lots of six locations in the country. There's 6 places in the nation, in the United States, which got to 100% of it. We switched to electric vehicles instead of gasoline-powered vehicles. We switched to electric heat pumps instead of, make this transition. They've got to make it honest. There's regulatory case law it's really just a buyout of the actual monopoly is it was done 20 years ago in Maine. We had CMB sell our hurricanes 20%. With fundraising and with boots on the ground and volunteers, and we're going to take it to the legislature. If the legislature and governor won't do it, we'll take it to the people. We'll put it on the ballot. But we're determined to make this happen because of that, right? Goes to energy. So that means there are many of those single moms out there who are being much more limited, right? Switching them. So you can find this in that website store. Truly high-speed, world-class internet out to all of Maine, and that's a game changer for our economy as well. The best way to do that, once again, is not pay for municipal management. The city of Chattanooga it's called the Wired City because they have consumer-owned electricity company, and that same company provides fiber optic to every home. It's affordable to every home. They have Georgia's greatest public access. Now Mississippi is going to have access. That's not just like being there are some great vegetation, which releases methane, which is a much more potent greenhouse gas.
Hello? Sure. Yep. Hey, Justin, can you come here for a sec? The person about that cat call.
I had to get him now because he might sell out.
Like you jealous. Like you jealous and sucking my leg. Cat lady called.
I don't have anything to see here.
Hey, it's Kara, and I have Justin here too.
Oh, wonderful. How are you doing?
Good.
Really?
Yeah, it's accumulating pretty fast, actually.
Yeah. It's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
You were interested in sweet little Aiden, which is wonderful. He's really the cutest little dog.
I assume there's probably a lot of people that apply for that.
Yeah, it's well, and it's really, again, my tomorrow, and then how do we make this happen, and can we make it happen, and all that good stuff. So, but it's, with the pandemic, everybody's home and lonely, and everybody wants
dynamics that are uniquely difficult, or I'm trying to figure them out. But I know that my power came from my community. And so I have to, and it's so much easier to not get, lost in the particular dynamics of Augusta, or I guess Augusta through Zoom, because in part because there is a limited amount of doors I'm being let in so far. But, it's like I will continue to have to maybe work a bit harder. But, I remember and am mostly continuing to talk to my community. And that's why I'm there anyway.
Wonderful. Are there any pluses or minuses of being an independent that you'd like to discuss?
Gosh, I mean, no more than I've already complained a little bit. But I can kind of go on and on, but to really get down to it. And so I appreciate that dynamic. Is like, on one hand, it's I'm independent, so I'm alone and removed in certain ways and have to really figure it out myself. And at the same time, there are certain things I don't have to figure out, or I don't forget, which is, who voted for me and who I really serve and what I bring to the table, which is that rootedness in community. So it's like I'm independent, but really I'd like to think I'm just grassroots, and I could technically be part of a party, but that is the way that I got there, and a party wouldn't be able to, I guess maybe take credit for that almost.
Fair enough.
Whether or not it was true, yeah.
So one of your major issues is with the environment, and can you talk to us a little bit about the environmental work that you've done so far?
So I will say, especially with the Maine Won't Wait plan coming out pretty soon after the election, my feeling about this work is, my background is in advocacy and in organizing. So I almost feel like I'm beginning a longer term process here, or want to be part of that. And so just because I had been out of state, really fortunate to be in university, but that was in another state for the past few years. So right now, in as much as I can, it's understanding the given dynamics, because there's certain things about this plan and about all the different constituencies that are organized and involved in it, especially more formalized organizations. But I know that there are certain places where we're dealing with regulatory capture in different ways, and have to think about where we go from here and imagine something into the future. So for me, I'm as much as possible trying to ask questions and meet people where they're at to figure out, where we go from here. And folks like leaders, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants like Representative Barry, who spoke before, but consumer and utility is certainly part of the conversation for me. And I'm here for 2 years, but this is movement work. So I'm trying to figure out just how to be most useful to that. And even being here tonight and speaking with everyone who's great to show up here is part of that, I'd like to think.
All right. Well, thank you, Sophie. Are there any questions for Sophie? I don't see any questions now. I think that we can turn this over to Seth for Sherri Lysy. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you.
Yeah, so our next guest is Sherri Lysy, who is a housing organizer in Portland, the founder of the Foreside Tenants Union. So thanks for joining us, Sherri. If you could just tell us a little bit about the Foreside Tenants Union, how it came about, and what the goals of your organizing are.
Hi, Seth. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Seth. So here in Portland, we passed a tenants rent protection ordinance back in November. And various people have definitely struggled with their landlords to have that implemented. There's been a few hoops to jump through with the city, some confusion around how to actually get those protections in place and secure for tenants. So after kind of a rigmarole with everybody, I had reached out to People First Portland, who's been a really invaluable resource, and worked with them to form the Tenants Union to hopefully bring resources and advocacy to other tenants who may not have the ability to fight on their own.
So you mentioned People First Portland, and I guess sort of what is the organizing like around tenants issues in Portland right now? And what sort of support do you need from people who might live in the area?
I think right now, really the most support that we can offer one another is to work collectively. So anybody who is a part of Bellport or Foreside, there are also some talks of some other tenants unions popping up throughout Portland. Please reach out. If you're a part of Foreside, our email is foreside.tenants.union@gmail.com. People First Portland is also a great resource. They will be able to funnel you to the correct people. We're stronger when we work together. So really right now we are trying to organize around getting people involved and then start working collectively to really get to the root issues that people have. And if anyone has any questions in regards to the rent control ordinance, I've kind of been through the whole thing, so please reach out. Happy to share the resources that I've had handed over to me.
So I did get a question. So what are the conditions like at Foreside? Why do you feel that like a collective voice is so necessary?
This building particularly was sold relatively recently. previously, my rent was stable all the way through for years. The building is not the worst I've ever lived in, but it's outdated, it's dilapidated. Systems are, they work, but they aren't necessarily where they could be, and other features of the building as well. And when this Foresight came in, they basically are just working to bring rents up to market rate. So they're not offering tenants any additional support. They're not offering tenants any updates or any safer living conditions than we've had, and simply trying to gouge people in the middle of a pandemic because the market will bear it. And it doesn't serve my value set. It doesn't seem to be a moral standing, and I hope that we can work to get tenants protected instead of landlords lining the pockets.
And so have a lot of people who live there, have they been laid off during the pandemic, or people economically just really can't bear this right now?
Yeah, I know multiple of my neighbors are either out of work now or working multiple jobs to try to make ends meet because previous employment is no longer an option. And in the midst of this, the landlord and the management company have been trying to increase rent about 30%. And that's in my building and multiple other buildings that I know of for long-term tenants as they've taken over. So not only is it not economically sustainable in this current climate, and because people are experiencing more hardship than usual, but it's 30% rent hikes in 4 months, even over the course of a calendar year. It's just not right. And there should be something in place, and there is now, to protect people. And so I want to try to help see through that those protections are actually honored.
Definitely. So do you have any advice for people who might be living elsewhere in the state and would like to organize where they're living?
I actually am in the process of compiling different resources. There is an organization called Maine Renters United, MRU. They have been really helpful. I would definitely recommend reaching out to them. They have a standing meeting on Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. through Zoom that anybody can hop onto. And beyond that, there are some resources nationwide that I have been using. One is Autonomous Tenants Union, and that is a nationwide organization that is getting different tenant unions kind of in touch based on chapter. So right now I'm working to get in touch with the New England chapter. So those resources are out there. It does take a little bit of digging. And again, I'm happy to share any of those. Reach out through the union address and I can definitely pass those on.
Awesome, thank you. And it looks like we've got somebody in the chat who's from MRU. So contact them if you have more questions. And I don't think I have any more in the Q&A for you, Sherri, but thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for the work you guys are doing.
Fighting for renters. So we'll move on to Jillian to introduce Grayson, who's actually working on some legislation to help prevent people from getting evicted.
Hi, and welcome, Grayson. Grayson is a longtime activist and community organizer, and he is in his first term from House District 37. Welcome, Grayson.
Hey, Jillian. Thanks, everybody, for having me on the call. I'm just so impressed with the work of people like Sherri, who are in the trenches and standing up for tenants. One of the reasons I decided to run was I was helping with a bill. I was helping organize around some housing issues in Portland. And I was testifying in Augusta, and I really got to see, landlords have some deep pockets and a lot of time on their hands, and they are able to organize and get their voices heard in Augusta. Nobody's listening to tenants. So it's so important and so crucial that we hear from people who are renting their homes. It's 40% of people in the city of Portland. Housing was already a crisis before the pandemic, and the pandemic has just exacerbated the housing crisis on so many fronts. Just to throw out a couple of statistics. So before the pandemic, Maine was the 9th least affordable state in the country in which to rent when comparing wages to rents. That's only gotten worse. In Portland, on average for the last 4 or 5 years, we've had 30 or 40 people perishing for no other reason than exposure on the street. So people without homes dying of exposure on the streets of Portland. That's, for a city the size of Portland, that is an atrocity in my mind unfolding right underneath our noses. In 2020, tragically, that number was 60, and that's unacceptable. We have to stop that. Why can't we figure out how to do housing right? So housing, in my mind, is a human right. We have to figure out ways to make it less of a market commodity to be bought and sold at a profit, and more of a community good where people can, especially during a pandemic, have a reliable roof and place to stay. You know, how are you going to socially distance if you don't have a place to live? So one of the things that I'm really concerned with is evictions, and that's been a big topic of discussion for the last while. And in the CDC, the federal CDC did enact an evictions moratorium in September, and that's been extended, and that's been a really good thing. But what people don't realize is that that eviction moratorium was very narrow, and it only applied to tenants who were unable to pay their rent because of financial hardship caused by the pandemic. It did not make any mention of no cause evictions. So your landlord can still evict you for no reason whatsoever. They just can't evict you because you can't afford it. So my bill that I've introduced is an emergency evictions ban that would extend the evictions moratorium to no cause evictions and also tie it to the state of emergency. There was research done showing the states that had evictions bans had lower death tolls and death rates from COVID-19. It's not, in my mind, it makes perfect sense. You know, if you got people who are out on the street and they're sick and they're getting each other sick, and it's a public health good at this moment in time to keep people in their homes. So this is a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. But the housing crisis, it's got to go further than that. We have to figure out ways of building affordable housing and getting beyond, Maine. I love Maine. I grew up in a postcard picturesque town in Maine called Camden, and you got all these, I love it there, but, and my sister's on the select board there, and she may laugh to hear me say this, but, it's kind of a NIMBY town. They don't want affordable housing. And they have very strong zoning laws to that effect. I love Camden. I'm sorry if anybody here is from Camden, but we've got to figure out ways to build affordable housing around the state. And so there are a bunch of bills working on that to raise revenue. I think one of the things that's come up recently is that housing prices in the state have gone up, I think, something like 40% since the pandemic, because you have so many people moving up here to take advantage of our way of life and to be able to socially distance, work remotely. We need them, welcome them with open arms. Maine needs young people moving here desperately. But these are also folks who are buying up property left and right, cash, sometimes sight unseen, tens or some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars over the asking price. So these are people with means who are coming here, and in my mind, we should be, progressively raising revenue from those home sales. So that's one bill that Representative Lynn Williams, Bar Harbor's working on, is a progressive real estate transfer tax. Representative Chris Kessler in South Portland is also working on a vacancy fee. So, you've got a lot of homes here that are second homes, that are vacation homes. They sit vacant 9 months out of the year, just sitting there on the beach, and they're, it's potentially, year-round homes, and we could be raising revenue there. And the state is in a revenue crisis right now. There's this whole fight happening with the budget. And, we'll be talking about more of that on future calls, but the state is starved for revenue, and there are people here, and we should take advantage of raising the revenue from folks who can afford it. So that's, some of the stuff that I'm working on. So I want to see an emergency evictions ban, but, in the immediate term, but long term, we also really need to figure out better ways of doing housing and making, housing a human right. So, kind of how do all these things tie in together? I think Our Revolution really stands for, it's housing, it's healthcare, it's a habitable planet, so we need that. That's why we're all working together on these progressive issues, and they go hand in hand. We don't want to just throw up unsustainable housing in, on strips that are, away from downtowns. We got to do it right. We have a chance to do it right. So that's what I'm working on.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Grayson. Are there any questions in the Q&A? All right. I don't see any. I guess I can turn it over to Seth for our final guest, unless, Seth, you see any questions.
No, I didn't get any questions. But thank you, Grayson, for fighting for working class people. I know rent's just been terribly unaffordable my entire adult life, and it's such a huge issue. Our next guest is Abbie Ryder, who is the campaign manager for Maine Healthcare Action, working to get universal healthcare passed in Maine. So thank you, Abbie, for joining us. Tell us a little bit about the process right now. I understand that there's a referendum that we're gathering signatures for.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Seth, and thank you, Our Revolution, for inviting me to speak on behalf of this. We are a very brand new organization trying to push this forward. So I just want to backtrack a little bit and give a little background as to how we got here. I was the former field director working with Maine All Care, who is the local chapter of the Physicians for a National Health Program. Obviously, they believe this needs to happen on a national level, but Maine All Care was focused solely on the state of Maine and getting that implemented due to our federal government being so far behind from pushing that forward. So I spent 3 years there talking to the community about healthcare, about their accessibility, affordability, which it's not affordable. And, a lot of really pull at the heartstrings stories that we heard throughout these years about, people putting off treatments and medication due to bills, actually people choosing to rather die than to burden their families. So we did a lot of research along these lines, not just talking to the public, but we have a lot of physicians, economists, and policy people that sat on the board of Maine All Care. And through that, we worked directly with the legislature, talking to them, going to public hearings, pleading our cases for universal health care. And there, we saw a plethora of universal bills come across the table just to sort of go nowhere. We looked at a lot of different states who were pursuing, their statewide initiatives, a lot with direct bills, with fiscal notes attached to those and direct funding mechanisms. And we saw them failing. They were being outspent, 4 times the amount they were able to raise and spend on the campaign by the opposition. And as we know, health insurance and big pharma lobbyists, they have really deep pockets, and they're 2 of the top 3 lobbyists in DC. So we tend to never see this reform move forward, even though it's desperately needed. And if the pandemic has not highlighted that enough, I don't know what will. So we looked at the situation here in Maine. There was economic studies that have been conducted that have indicated there'd be significant savings. Maine All Care actually conducted a study through the Maine Economic Center for Development and Policy. And there, one of the savings that was indicated that Maine could save roughly $15 billion in the first year implementing a publicly funded system. So we started looking at all of the different states that pursued types of initiatives, Colorado being one of them with Amendment 69 that failed horrendously. And a lot had to do with how that referendum was worded. And let me just read you the first line of that referendum, and you'll understand why it failed so terribly. And not to mention the Secretary of State was a Republican who was very opposed to universal health care. So the first line reads, shall state taxes be increased $25 billion annually in the first full fiscal year, and by such amounts that are raised thereafter. So if you're a voter, and that's the first line you read, and the text itself was incredibly long, you're probably going to stop there and just say, no, I'm not going to vote for this. And it did fail significantly. So we started looking at all of our different options here in Maine. And we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So like I said, there's been a plethora of universal healthcare bills that have been put forth by the legislature, and they've just gone nowhere. This is not an endorsement by any means, but LD 1611 that was put in by Representative Heidi Brooks of Auburn was one of the most comprehensive universal bills that we've seen come across the table. And, due to COVID, it just sort of stalled out, even though it did pass committee. So we know there's movement happening there, and we know there's comprehensive bills coming from the legislature. So we thought that the missing element that needed to happen was putting people on record demanding that this take place. So we put the language together, and we decided to go the route of a resolve. So a resolve does not have an attached specific bill, but our resolve would direct the Maine state legislature to not only draft a publicly funded universal health care bill, but if we are successful, it would also require them to implement that by 2024. Now, I know that seems like a far way away, but it's not that far. It's 2021. So what we're going to have to do is we've already started the signature collection process. So it's very much like our referendum process here in Maine, even though it's a resolve. So we're required to gather 10% of the voter turnout from the last gubernatorial election. So that's 63,037 valid signatures that need to be turned over. In order to make sure that we meet that number, we're going to have a buffer. So we're estimating that we'd have to gather about 80,000 signatures. And that's where we're at right now. We have our petitions now. We've been sending out small packets. I'm doing outreach. I know there's a special election coming up in the Kennebec region to fill our new Secretary of State's office. Shenna Bellows is leaving as a senator. So we're excited to see how this turns out. And we did see, the no CMP corridor be successful during this COVID era. We've been sort of apprehensive with pushing it forward due to COVID, but we know the time is now. So we're going to get a lot more aggressive with our petitioning.
Awesome. So I don't think I have any questions in the Q&A yet. Let me just check. So I think you answered pretty much all the questions that I had previously drafted up for this. What sort of problems do you see coming down the pike with this?
Yeah, so that's why we went this route. So, we wanted to avoid the question of how will this be funded? Since the bill is not drafted yet, those funding mechanisms will be left up to the legislature to decide. But like I said before, there have been multiple economic feasibility studies done here in Maine, specifically to Maine, not just nationally, that have indicated significant savings. And it's just a matter of, I think this is like I said, the missing component is that applied pressure and putting the accountability on the shoulders of the legislature. And no other state has actually pursued this type of effort. And we feel like this is the only way something this large is going to get done, is if it's coming from the legislature first, even though we're the people pushing for the applied pressure. Do any legislators support this idea? Yes. I'm sorry, I'm reading the comments before you're even getting there.
I support the idea. I'll say that.
I'll second that motion.
Great. Yeah, I'm not going to call out names right now because I have not asked permission to do so. But like I said, we've been working with legislators throughout the years during my work with Maine All Care. I'm no longer with Maine All Care. They are still in existence. They're still doing the educational effort. We are doing the political work and the lobbying effort to get this done. And yes, we've had many, many conversations with legislators, and we have found that a lot of them are in support.
Somebody in the comments just asked, how are we going to message this? Explaining the money issues to the public can be pretty complicated.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, when you start talking about taxation, of course it's complicated. But, you know, we have our neighbors to the north that we can reference. You know, they spend a lower percentage of their GDP, and everybody there has access to affordable healthcare. It's just provided, it's a thing. We spend well above that, and we're still leaving people uninsured, underinsured, and the system's not equitable. You know, there's many barriers for individuals, people of color, due to their sexual orientation, their background and history, pre-existing conditions. That's a term that only exists here in the US. That's something that was crafted by insurance companies. So when we talk about that, the money, we could also reference Canada again. Saskatchewan, the father of universal healthcare, Tommy Douglas, started universal healthcare in the province of Saskatchewan, which is very comparable to the state of Maine as far as their population, the amount of rural communities, and their poverty level. And they were able to succeed. And even today, you know, the Canadian healthcare system, all of the provinces regulate how those how the payments are allocated in their healthcare system. Even though they have an overall arching universal system, the provinces still have that regulation. And you can bring it to a personal level as well. You know, ask individuals, what are you getting for your health coverage? What are you getting for your health insurance? Have your premiums gone up? Have your co-payments gone up? Have your deductibles gone up? And of course, the answer is always going to be yes. One of the other things that the pandemic highlighted is insurance tied to employment and just how bad that is. Roughly 30% of people in the state of Maine get their insurance through their employer. And, you know, due to the pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs. So not only did they lose their jobs, but they also lost their health coverage during a global health pandemic. It's terrible.
Yeah, I know. Due to the pandemic, I mean, we're seeing why we need this more than ever. You know, I pay large out of pocket for my health care, and I still end up with thousands of dollars of out of pocket costs. You know, my wife is currently uninsured as well, so it's a struggle for everybody. But thank you, Abbie, for talking to us about this. And we'll put the link in the chat for mainehealthcareaction.org and get people to sign up to help out on this.
Great. I really appreciate it, Seth, and Our Revolution. And like Seth said, we are looking for volunteers. And of course, we're looking for financial backing. Anything that people could do will help us a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to Marcella, who's going to go over our membership appeal and our calls to action.
Great. Thank you, Seth. I just want to, say thank you to all of our speakers tonight. This was a really great lineup, and I think we covered a broad range of issues that are really facing Mainers right now, particularly working people in Maine. I just want to call back quickly to something that Representative Berry said about economic justice is our future. We have no other alternative. We need economic justice. And clearly we've got a lot in the pipeline to work on, but we really need your help to help keep fighting for these progressive policies like universal healthcare coverage, affordable housing, and guaranteeing workers a living wage. You can become a member for as little as $5 a month. Sign up is going to be at the link in the chat. For listeners calling in, that link is ourrev.us/2021 MEMEM. Again, it's ourrev.us/2021 MEMEM. And now I'm going to turn it over to Hal to talk about the other initiatives that were discussed tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Marcella, and what a great call, tremendous guest. Grayson deserves most of the credit for bringing together these awesome people, and of course, they deserve the rest. So thank you so much, Marcella. Yeah, 2021 MEMEM, that's how I like to remember it, ourrev.us/2021, the year MEMEM, me for Maine, Maine member. Support the Maine Power for Maine People initiative. You can browse to mp4mp.org, Maine Power for Maine People. And we heard Representative Berry, and you folks are really lucky to have such great progressive representation in your legislature. And we just need to have more and more folks join them so we can pass the bills that will make life better. I mean, it's really hard to listen. My friends, I'll get to healthcare action, but people, Seth and Jillian, and these are my friends. And when you hear about folks going without health insurance or struggling because of the cost of an apartment, or possibly, facing eviction, it's just heartrending. It's just awful. And that's why we're joining together. That's why we're fighting together to stop that. So please, if you can be on our calls, if you can go to any Our Revolution Maine website, we'd really, really appreciate it. Our Facebook page, Our Revolution Maine on Facebook. And, that's how we can really make a difference. Join together, be on our next call. And again, if you can, for that $5, if you can, if it's not going to put you at risk in terms of any of the issues we've discussed, we appreciate that at ourrev.us/MEMEM. Okay, for Maine Power for Maine People, mp4mp.org, mainehealthcareaction.org, that's for single payer. That would save the state, and it would save you a huge amount of money, and you'd get better care as well. That's where you can also get involved in the ballot initiative for universal health care. We're fighting to end student debt. ourrev.us/no-edge-debt. And I didn't get that link up there. I'm sorry. No edge debt. If you can remember that, and hopefully, Marcella, maybe you can get that link in the chat. We are phone banking. We are doing everything we can to elect Nina Turner, our own Nina Turner, to Congress. Ourrev.us. That's an easy one to remember. Call for Nina. Call for Nina. And now let's go to Seth real quick. We'll do our chat just real quick. Our calls. Connecticut is Thursday. That's tomorrow, if you can make it. And I'm doing South Carolina on Saturday. So I'm all over the country. And we have an economic justice town hall. We're talking about that. Our great, I think that says Maine, but I believe that's Wisconsin. We'll be holding that meeting on Saturday as well. So that's, I was going to say that's going to do it. We've got our Florida meeting as well next week. And our Monday night calls are every Monday night, 8:30 p.m. And that does bring us to the end of the call. Seth, do you want to lead us out?
Yeah, of course. So thanks everybody for joining us. Like we do at the end of all of our calls. we're going to do our chant. When we organize, we win. So on the count of 3, when we organize, we win. When we organize,
we win.
When we organize,
we win.
Thank you and good night.
Bye, everybody.
Right.